My family treated me like trash for 17 years and worshipped my sister. But when they stole the prom dress I bought with my money, my grandma stepped in and destroyed them all. I'm 17 years old. I'm in my senior year of high school. And honestly, I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago basically saved my life. Even though at the moment it felt like I was dying. I guess I should start by explaining what my family was like. Or I mean, how everything worked before my grandmother stepped in and changed everything. I have an older sister, Victoria, who's 19 now, and she has always been my parents' favorite. It's not that I'm exaggerating or being dramatic. It's just that literally everything in that house revolved around her for as long as I can remember. My parents are both like 40 years old, and I don't know at what point they decided I was worthless and Victoria was perfect. But that's how things were my whole life. When I was little, I thought maybe it was my fault. You know, that if I behaved better or got better grades or whatever, maybe they'd love me the same as her. But over time, I realized that no matter what I did, it was never going to be enough. Victoria always got everything she wanted. New clothes, the latest iPhone, an expensive laptop for college, a car when she turned 18, like everything. And it's not that my parents were rich. I mean, they had normal jobs and made decent money, but they weren't swimming in cash either. They just chose to spend everything on her. Me, on the other hand, I wore her old clothes. I had a phone I bought myself with money. I earned babysitting and cleaning houses since I was like 14, and basically anything I needed I had to get myself. My parents gave me the bare minimum, like food and a roof, but nothing more. They didn't even buy me school supplies. I had to buy them with my own money. But the worst part wasn't the lack of material things, honestly. The worst part was how they treated me emotionally. Victoria could do whatever she wanted and there were never any consequences. She could yell at me, insult me, even hit me sometimes, and my parents would just say things like, "You're being too sensitive," or, "It's not that big a deal. Stop exaggerating." One time she pushed me down the stairs when I was like 13 and I sprained my ankle. And when I told my mom, she literally said I probably tripped on my own and was blaming Victoria to get her in trouble. Can you believe that? And Victoria wasn't just spoiled. She had serious issues, like mental health problems. But my parents never got her help, because in their world, she was perfect, and I was the problem. I grew up feeling invisible, or worse, like I was a burden to my own family. My parents never went to any of my school events, never asked how I was doing in school even though I was always a good student, never congratulated me for anything. But with Victoria, it was different. Even when she failed classes or got suspended from school for fighting with other students, they'd find a way to say it wasn't her fault. It was exhausting, honestly, living like that every day, knowing that no matter what I did, I was never going to be seen or valued. The only person in my family who actually cared about me was my paternal grandmother. She's like 66 years old and was always kind to me, but she lived in another city, so I didn't see her that often. Maybe like 2 or 3 times a year, on special occasions and stuff. She always asked me how I was doing and treated me with affection, but I never told her what was happening at home because I was afraid my parents would get mad at me or punish me, and I also didn't want to be a burden to her. I thought maybe if I didn't complain and just endured it until I graduated high school, I could go to college on a scholarship and start a new life far away from all of them. Then came prom, which was in May of this year. I had been saving money for months to buy myself a nice dress because I knew my parents weren't going to buy me anything. I worked extra hours babysitting, cleaned houses on weekends, even sold some of my old stuff, and finally managed to save up enough money. I went alone to a store and bought myself a beautiful dress, dark blue, that fit me perfectly. It wasn't super expensive, but I loved it, and for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about something. I had a date for prom with a guy from my class who was nice to me, and even though it wasn't anything serious, it was going to be a nice night. Or so I thought. The day of prom, I got home from school at like 4 in the afternoon. The dance started at 7, and I was planning to get ready with plenty of time. But when I went into my room, my dress wasn't where I had left it. I looked everywhere. In my closet, under the bed, in the bathroom, and nothing. I started to panic. Literally felt like my heart was going to burst out of my chest. I ran downstairs and found my mom in the living room, and when I asked her if she had seen my dress, she looked at me with that face she makes when she's about to tell me something I know is going to destroy me. She said, "Victoria needed a dress for a party tonight, so I gave her yours." Just like that, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I just stood there, unable to process what I had just heard. I said, "But Mom, that's my prom dress. I bought it with my own money. The dance is in 3 hours." And she just shrugged and said, "Well, Victoria needed it more. She's going to an important party with her college friends, and you can go to another prom next year." Except, I couldn't go to another prom next year because this was my senior prom, my only chance, and she knew it perfectly well. I ran up to Victoria's room, and sure enough, she was there, wearing my dress, doing her makeup in front of the mirror like nothing was wrong. I yelled at her, "That's my dress. Take it off right now." And she just looked at me and laughed. She said, "Relax. It's not a big deal. Besides, it looks better on me anyway." I tried to take it off her, but she pushed me and yelled at me to get out of her room. My parents heard the commotion and came upstairs, and when I tried to explain to them that Victoria had stolen my dress that I had bought with my money, my dad told me to stop being selfish and that Victoria had already put it on, so it was too late to do anything about it. I locked myself in my room crying, literally sobbing until my chest hurt, and I tried to find something, anything, to be able to go to prom, but I didn't have anything appropriate. All I had was Victoria's old, worn-out clothes that weren't suitable for a formal dance. I called my date and told him I wasn't going to be able to go. Made up some excuse because I didn't want to admit what had happened. And I stayed in my room all night crying while I heard Victoria laughing and getting ready with my parents helping her as if I didn't exist. That was probably one of the darkest nights of my life, feeling completely invisible and worthless. A few days later, my grandmother called me. She always called after important events to ask me how things went. And this time she wanted to see prom pictures. I didn't know what to tell her. Honestly, I was quiet for a moment, and she noticed something was wrong. She asked me, "What happened, honey? Why didn't you go?" And something in me broke in that moment. I told her everything, about the dress, about how my parents had given it to Victoria, about how I missed prom. She was silent for a moment that felt eternal, and then said in a voice I had never heard from her, "I'm coming tomorrow. I need to see you." The next day, my grandmother arrived and picked me up, told my parents she was going to take me to dinner to make up for prom. They didn't seem to care much, basically said okay, and went on with their business. My grandmother took me to a nice restaurant, and during dinner, she was so kind to me, asked me about school, about my college plans, about everything. And at the end of dinner, she gave me a wrapped box. And when I opened it, it was a new MacBook. Like an expensive and beautiful laptop, she said. "I know you're going to need this for college, and I want you to know that I'm very proud of you and everything you've accomplished, despite everything." I cried right there in the restaurant. I couldn't believe someone was giving me something so valuable, something I actually needed, and that no one else in my family would have ever given me. When I got home that night with the laptop, Victoria saw it and immediately demanded I give it to her. My parents were there and supported her demand. Said, I didn't need such an expensive laptop, and that Victoria needed it more for college. But this time, something in me changed. I was fed up, completely fed up with all that shit. Sorry for the language, but it's the truth. I told them no, that Grandma had given it to me, and that if they tried to take it from me, I was going to tell her everything that had been happening for years. Victoria got furious, started screaming and saying I was selfish and a liar, but for the first time in my life, I stood my ground. I went up to my room, locked the door, and hid the laptop where I knew they wouldn't find it. The next few days were tense, like Victoria wasn't talking to me, and my parents were treating me coldly, but I was already used to it. What I wasn't used to was feeling like I finally had a little bit of power, a little bit of control over my own life. A few weeks later, I asked my grandmother if we could meet again but alone, without my parents knowing. She agreed, and we met at a cafe near her house. There, sitting across from her with a hot chocolate that was already getting cold because I couldn't even drink it from the lump in my throat. I told her everything. I told her about years of emotional abuse, about how Victoria would hit me, and my parents did nothing, about how they never bought me anything, and I had to work to get even the most basic things, about how I felt invisible in my own family. I showed her photos on my phone of bruises Victoria had left on me in the past, told her about the times they had denied me food as punishment for things I hadn't even done, about how my parents always blamed me for everything, while Victoria had no consequences for anything. I cried so much that people in the cafe were staring at us, but I didn't care. My grandmother was crying too, and kept saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have noticed before. After I calmed down a bit, my grandmother made some calls. She called my Uncle Thomas, who works with legal stuff, and other family members. She told them what was happening, and everyone was horrified. That same afternoon, my grandmother told me we were going to go home to get my things, that I was going to come live with her, and that this was over. I was scared, honestly. Scared of how my parents and Victoria would react. But I also felt this strange relief, like finally someone was protecting me. We got to the house at like 6 in the evening. My grandmother went in first and told my parents she was taking me with her, that she had heard things that had her very concerned, and that we needed to talk seriously. My parents tried to act like they didn't know what she was talking about, but my grandmother didn't believe them at all. I went up to my room to pack my things, which didn't take long because I basically had nothing. Just old clothes and some books and the laptop my grandmother had given me. Victoria followed me to my room and started yelling at me, saying I was a liar, that I was trying to ruin the family, that I was dramatic and an exaggerator. I tried to ignore her and keep packing, but she was getting more and more aggressive. Suddenly, she grabbed my arm and threw me against the wall, and when I tried to defend myself, she punched me in the face with a closed fist. I felt a horrible pain in my nose and started bleeding, like blood was running down my face and staining my clothes. I screamed, and my grandmother ran up the stairs. What happened next was chaotic. My grandmother saw what Victoria had done and immediately called an ambulance and the police. My parents came upstairs, and when they saw the scene, they tried to minimize it, said it was probably an accident, that sisters fight and those things. But my grandmother wouldn't let them talk anymore. She literally yelled at them like I had never heard anyone yell, told them they were pathetic, abusive parents, and that this wasn't going to stay like this. Victoria was panicking, started crying and saying she was sorry, but it was already too late. The ambulance arrived and took me to the hospital. My nose was broken. I needed them to fix it and put a bandage on it. The doctors took pictures of my injuries and documented everything, and they also noticed some old bruises I had on my arms from previous incidents. A social worker came to talk to me, and I told her the whole situation. It was hard, super hard, but it was also liberating in a way. Like finally someone was really listening to me. That night I went to my grandmother's house. She has a nice house with a guest room that she turned into my room, and for the first time in a long time I felt safe. I cried myself to sleep, but it was a different kind of crying. It wasn't desperation. It was more like relief, mixed with all the accumulated pain of years. The following days were crazy with legal stuff and procedures. The police filed a report and Victoria was arrested for assault. My parents paid her bail and got her out of jail, obviously. But things didn't end there. My Uncle Thomas helped my grandmother with the whole legal process, and it turned out that when other family members found out what had been happening, several of them also stopped talking to my parents. My grandmother even threatened to disinherit them if they didn't cooperate with the investigations. My parents at first called me and sent me messages blaming me for everything, saying I had ruined the family, that Victoria could go to jail because of me, that I was ungrateful. But when they realized that the rest of the family was judging them and that my grandmother was serious about the inheritance, they changed their tune. Suddenly they were apologizing to me, saying they hadn't realized how bad things were, that they wanted to fix our relationship. But I didn't believe them anymore. Honestly, their apologies sounded empty and fake. My grandmother got me a therapist, someone specialized in family trauma, and I started going to sessions twice a week. At first, it was weird talking about everything with a stranger, but over time I realized it was really helping me. I learned that none of what happened to me was my fault. That being the family scapegoat doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. That I deserve to be loved and valued. I also had to prepare for final exams because all this happened like a month before the school year ended, so I had to balance therapy, the legal process, and studying like crazy to not ruin my grades. And a legal process took several months, but eventually Victoria was sentenced to jail time for the assault. It wasn't much time, like 6 months I think, but it was something. My parents were also charged with child neglect and had to pay fines and do community service. I got a restraining order against Victoria, but I decided not to get one against my parents, even though my grandmother suggested I should. I don't know why. I guess part of me still had hope that someday they could change, even though I knew it probably wasn't going to happen. The most incredible thing is that despite all the chaos and trauma, I managed to get good grades on my final exams. They weren't perfect, obviously, because I was dealing with a million things. but they were good enough. And then, like 2 months later, I received an acceptance letter from my dream college, a school that was several hours away, with a scholarship that covered almost everything. When I opened that letter in my grandmother's kitchen and saw the word congratulations, I cried again, but this time they were tears of pure happiness. It's been like 6 months since all that. Now I'm in my first semester of college, living in the campus dorms, and honestly, my life is completely different. I made friends who are kind and genuine, my professors are great, and I'm studying what I'm really passionate about. I also have a boyfriend, Alex, who I met in one of my classes, and his family is amazing, like the complete opposite of mine. The first time I went to dinner at his house and saw how his parents interacted with him and his siblings, like with real love and respect, I almost started crying right there. Victoria got out of jail like a month ago, according to what my grandmother told me, but I haven't had any contact with her and I don't plan to ever. The restraining order is still in effect anyway. My parents have sent me some messages trying to reconnect, but I haven't responded. I cut off all contact with them and, honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be ready to forgive them or have any kind of relationship with them. For now, I'm focused on myself, on healing, on building a life that's mine. I still go to therapy, now once a week through video calls because I'm at college, and I continue working on all the trauma and learning to trust people. It's not easy. There are days when I feel anxious or sad for no apparent reason, days when I question whether I deserve all the good things happening to me now. But my therapist helps me navigate those feelings and remember that I do deserve to be happy, that I don't have to carry the weight of what my family did to me. My grandmother is still my rock, my favorite person in the world. We talk on the phone almost every day, and she comes to visit me on campus once a month. She tells me she's proud of me, that I'm strong and brave, and even though sometimes it's hard for me to believe it, I'm learning to accept her words. She also helps me financially when I need it, although I try not to depend too much on her because I want to be independent. The other day, Alex asked me if I ever miss my family, referring to my parents and Victoria. I thought about it for a moment and told him the truth, that I miss the idea of having a normal, loving family, but I don't miss the people they are. I miss what I never had, not what I lost. He understood and hugged me, and in that moment I realized I'm building my own family, a chosen family of people who really love me and value me for who I am. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, honestly. I don't know if my parents will ever truly understand the damage they did to me, or if Victoria will change and become a better person. But honestly, it's not my responsibility to find out anymore. My responsibility is to myself. It's to heal and grow and live the best life I can. And for the first time in my 17, now 18 years, I feel like I actually have the chance to do that.